Welcome to Parlor Talks. If you're an owner or manager of a label, folding carton, flexible packaging, or corrugated packaging printing company, this podcast is for you. We'll dive into the latest trends, innovations, strategies, and best practices shaping the package printing industry.
Hi everyone, I'm Kaylee Vandewater, Associate Content and Online Editor for Packaging Impressions. For today's episode of Parlor Talks, I have a few guests with me to speak about a really exciting development in sustainable inks. So recently, ACTEGA Living Ink Technologies and Waiakea Hawaiian Volcanic Beverages announced the first commercial use of ACTExact ink, a UV Flexo ink made with algae-based pigment, offering a carbon negative alternative to traditional carbon black. And this ink for this instance was used for the labels on Waiakea's beverage products. So today, to talk about this, I have with me Mel C. Bishop III, Vice President of Flexible Packaging and Global Market Manager for Labels at ACTEGA, and Dr. Scott Fulbright, CEO and co-founder of Living Ink Technologies. Thank you both for joining me. I really appreciate it. And so, Scott, I want to start with you. I think we often hear the term carbon neutral when it comes to materials and operations, where offsetting carbon emissions is the goal. Can you talk a little bit about why carbon negative ink? What was the impetus behind that?
Yeah, I think that at least at Living Ink, we see carbon as an issue that's going to have to be dealt with in the future. And so carbon neutral is a great goal. Carbon negative, in our opinion, is the ultimate goal. And so the ability to remove more carbon than is generated during the production of the material was our ultimate goal. And so we feel that that's important because there's technologies that are being developed that can remove carbon. Some are very early stage in commercialization. Some include kind of producing a biochar and burying it. And our mentality at Living Ink is let's make carbon negative materials that can be implemented into the supply chain to systematically solve the problem and really make a high quality product that can meet the economics and scale it that way and solve the carbon issue while making really great innovative materials that have a great marketing story as well. So really focused on the value of marketing and the carbon negative took us numerous pivots to get to that point. So that's a little background. And the other thing I'll say beyond carbon is that big story was circularity, turning waste to value, creating renewable pigments that are grown in sunlight. So there's a lot of other value besides carbon, but carbon is definitely one of our top priorities.
Mm-hmm. And so this ink specifically is derived from algae. So what exactly is it about algae that makes it a good fit for ink?
Yeah, well, algae is one of the oldest and most prolific organisms on the planet. And so it's fast growing. It uses carbon dioxide as its building blocks to grow. It uses sunlight as its energy. There's some great storytelling that can be had with algae. So 50% of the oxygen that we breathe at our desk here comes from algae and seaweed out in the ocean. So there's some great storytelling there. In terms of the actual product that we produce, we make a high quality pigment from algae. Algae cells are already very tiny. And so when we make pigments that go in ink, we want that to be a really small particle size. So inherently the physical properties allow us to make a really high quality product. And there's some other kind of science that helps algae make high quality products. So my background's in the algae biofuel space too. So connecting all those dots, that's where we landed in our feedstock.
Yeah. No, that's so interesting. Mel, my next question is for you actually. So this was the first commercial use of the ACTExact ink. Can you talk about some of the obstacles you had to overcome to develop this?
Yeah, so There's an extensive background here to some of the obstacles working with algae. As you could imagine, it's not as straightforward as some of the pigments that an organization like ours was used, commonly working with. One of the bridges and working with the experts at Actega, along with the experts with Living Ink, were really finding that way of getting the algae-based pigment into the radiation cured chemicals. And that was what I would say is probably was more of the first substantial obstacles in just grinding that pigment to create a dispersion that would then be able to be utilized in the real world, so that trying to create a situation where someone's looking at that black and not really being able to differentiate from an algae-based black versus a carbon-based black. With that being said, the two teams at Living Ink, along with the research and development team at Actega, came up with a really good solution. Then the next obstacle is really dialing in that particular color. And this isn't just so unique to just the algae. This is actually something that we experience in our everyday lives in the printing world, of creating a black that has jetness. And what that means is people really want that black not to look brown. They want that black to look more on the blue shade side. So it gets into a bit of that color theory. But that's something that's really common even with the carbon solutions. So once we were able to grind the pigment, really then starting to create that fine tuning, that color, that's when we bridged that gap of not really being able to distinguish between the algae and the carbon-based solutions that were in the market.
Um, Gotcha. So, um, obviously this was used for the labels for YK's beverages, but can you tell me a little bit more about like what applications it's designed for?
So with this particular radiation cured chemistry, the ACTExact algae-based black, this UV curable,
Mhm.
this will go across applications with labels, maybe even some unsupported film for flexible packaging. It could be on film label substrates, paper label substrate. So once really getting that pigment into a dispersion, the utility of the final ink is a bit more broad than just on a film substrate for labels. It's across multiple narrow web flexible packaging applications. If that answers your question, I don't know if there was maybe something a bit more specific there versus the substrate that it's applicable to work on.
Yeah, no, the substrate is exactly what I was looking for. So, um, I also wanted to hear a little bit, what does this performance of this ink look like on press versus like more traditional inks?
Good question. So the reason I pause a little bit is because with every research and development and bringing something like the algae-based black into a market space, you have iterations that kind of get you there. Now, where we're at, from an Actega perspective with this specific ink, we don't see the compromises. So with it on press, it's running like a carbon-based black ink. But the first iterations, I wouldn't have been able to tell you that. But at this final iteration and where we're at in the market, this iteration, you put it on, you're not going to be able to distinguish it. It's going to run plug and play like a standard ink out of our ink portfolio.
Want to level up your skills or empower your workforce? Meet iLearning Plus, the online education platform powered by our parent organization, Printing United Alliance. With on-demand courses and certifications, iLearning Plus helps print professionals stay ahead of industry trends, sharpen their expertise, and grow their careers. Whether you're elevating your skills or training your team, we've got the resources to keep you competitive. Printing United Alliance members save 20% on all courses and certifications. So get started today at ilearningplus.org and build a stronger future in print.
Scott, so I know you've been working with the YK team for several years now on this technology. what did the testing and implementation process actually look like?
Yeah, I mean, a little backstory there is that Ryan and I have been in contact over the years. He's been interested in algae-based packaging solutions. He heard about what we were doing and really became kind of an advocate of it and really wanted to be first to market. So we stayed in touch over the years. And, I think, pigment science can be complex. Ink chemistry and printing can be complex. And so as Ryan and I were talking, he was asking, can Living Ink and IKEA develop this together? And I said, we got to get a really strong partner on board, and that partner was ACTExact and their team to develop this. So, really a lot of conversations early on, bringing ACTExact into the mix. And then ACTExact is, world class at working with their customers who are the printers and understanding what the customer needs. So, ACTExact really kind of, I would say, led the collaboration and understanding what the application specifications were needed. They kind of worked with Living Ink to dial in the pigment and make sure that as Mel said, can make a good dispersion, high quality. And so I would say a lot of that collaboration was ACTExact and the printer working together. And then IKEA was there to kind of guide the expectations and really kind of pull the project through. So that's a little bit how it went. And as Mel mentioned, that took a couple iterations to get kind of a drop in ink that the printer could use. And so, yeah, that's a little bit how it looked.
Gotcha. And then in terms of like the final product, were there any compromises that were required with this ink, or was it kind of like it was basically what you would have gotten with traditional carbon black inks?
Mel, you want to take that one?
Yeah. That no problem, Scott. I'm sorry, I was pulling myself off mute. So where we've landed with this is what I mentioned earlier. We feel comfortable with this product looking like a standard UV ink out of our core portfolio from a performance perspective. And with every development project, it's not just unique to running this algae. We have seen this over my time as a research and development chemist. You perfect and you're able to get closer. You go reach your goal with the ink, and we're really comfortable with where the performance is, the color of the ink, because black it's to deliver that jetness, that appearance, and that's where we've landed. And you're looking at these labels side by side with something that would be printed with carbon black. You're not going to be able to just distinguish between the two, right? And some of that comes in our specialty at ACTExact, designing inks for fluid inks for narrow web applications in that let down portion. But we've got a quality dispersion now utilizing the algae ink from Living Ink, and we have a quality letdown, and the performance it looks just like standard products. Now it's time to see how it and I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. I don't know if the rest of the interview will get to how we start to scale, but as we start to scale, I think we'll go from some specific uses in the market, specific areas where we really see the value and the sustainability and the real value in the messaging behind coming from Living Ink. But as we scale, we'll start to see it go from specific opportunities to very generalized opportunity, just like we see with any research and development project bringing a new product to the market.
Right. So I have a couple more questions that's for either of you to answer. So I know carbon black has come under attack in some states such as New York and New Jersey. How do you see carbon negative solutions such as this algae derived ink playing a role in the future regulatory landscape?
I'll just say from what I know, there's uncertainty all over the world in a lot of different areas. I think in some of the policy and regulatory areas, there's uncertainty in all spaces, and specifically kind of packaging, I would say. So yeah, we get interest from all sorts of different brand partners from Asia to Europe to the US. Some of it's being driven by policy. for Living Ink, we're just telling a very positive story. All of the algae that we use right now is grown in the U.S. We produce the ink or the dispersions in the U.S. and work with ACTEga. And so, for us, it's really highlighting a really innovative marketing story about both carbon negative, but kind of, again, waste to value, circular economy. I think a lot of us can get on board with cleaner ecosystems and circular solutions like the algae black pigment. So that's kind of our take. I think the policy will have to shake out how it shakes out. And we're just going to try to keep making a high quality product and work with world-class partners to kind of scale it.
Gotcha.
And just to add a little bit from just, the commercial side, we see this with printers, and certainly the messaging that Living Ink delivers to brands and how brands connect with the converters who we're selling directly to. Some of them right off the bat, they see the value in the product, and those are the easy sales because they see where they can sell that value. But there's also these opportunities. Just where Living Ink, I have to compliment them and really excited about working with them, is how they have that brand pull through of really starting to pull the market here. Because when we're talking about sustainability, I wholeheartedly believe anyone in this space, we have a responsibility as it relates to to our customers, the environment, and the consumers on what we're delivering by way of packaging, and really tying some of this pull. We're already seeing a very strong interest as just with this new launch and where the word's getting out. Some of the strongest pull I'm having right now, I haven't even shared with Scott, is we're starting to see a lot in Europe. So I'm already starting to work with my colleagues in Europe on how we're going to be able to make the product and get the product so that we can capitalize on those opportunities, because the converters and the brands really see that. And Europe kind of leads the way a lot of time in this regulatory space, but really excited about what's to come.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, and I'll just throw on one thing. Besides the carbon black, and regulatory challenges, like I mentioned, my background's in kind of biofuels and biotechnology. I keep going back to this. I was already on several calls today where I just see ink as such a kind of a low hanging fruit to opportunity to tell stories and to talk about the innovative materials. And so that's where I get excited about the ink space and that just consumer facing side of packaging. I was talking to a packaging group this morning, and in the end they use corrugate, and they said, and then we use ink. And the individual's job, he was hired to innovate, and he's like, I got ink and I've got corrugate I can innovate with here. So let's talk. So those are the conversations I get excited about.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And Mel, you kind of referenced this a little earlier, but what needs to happen for solutions like this to scale across the industry?
So I think there's a couple things, and I one of them I keep coming back to from the Living Ink perspective is this messaging, where the Living Ink is really strong on the front end. Find the algae ink, what they're doing with algae ink to create a usable dispersion that creates it that we can utilize, but also this messaging into the market, really selling the story. And Scott just touched on it. It can be low hanging fruit. So we need that market pull. At the same time, for ACTEga, which is what we're strong at, is this market push. And especially in North America, where we're strong in the narrow web space, and even the mid to wide, where we're getting stronger in the mid to wide web space, is delivering that message and actually selling it into converters as well. And as this starts to scale and we're starting to produce more and more, I think that messaging behind it and seeing the value, at the same time, there is some economies of scale that come with as we start to make more, sell more in the market. It really starts to branch over into a lot of the general use. And those are just a few of the areas. I don't know, Scott, you might have something to share there, but yeah, that's from my side.
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's lowering cost, it's scaling up, it's getting understanding the forecast and commercial demand so that we can get all that working together. So yeah, I mean that's we have a very clear pathway to scale. It's just moving all parts of our business in parallel together. But again, as we scale, we lower price points, and that really helps kind of get into the more the mainstream. That being said, my co-founder Steve Albers was driving on the western slope of Colorado last weekend and went to a random gas station and found a bottle of Guayaquil water there, and bought the bottle, and on the label was the algae ink, the ink that ACTEga made for that project. And so, that starts to excite us when we start to say, hey, this product, the logo, the story is all across the country and all across the world on various branding applications. And so we feel good about that foundation. Now, a lot of this comes back to scaling the business and lowering price points for us at Living Ink.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So unfortunately, I think we're out of time. But thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today about the ACTExact carbon negative ink. It was a pleasure, and I'm really excited to see how this gets used in future applications. So thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having
Thank
us.
you.